Oh God, which do I choose? The fate of the world resides in my decision to pick a game that is designated for one specific gender since there are totally only 2 of them. Do I choose the game where I play science games for boys? Or do I pick the game where I play cooking games for girls? There has never been a more difficult decision than this in the entire history of the world. Screw it, Tetris. Picture this. It's 1985 or something like that, and you're a child. You're in the toy aisle. On the left side are the girl toys, and on the right side are the boy toys. You, with your gender ambiguous in this scenario, must pick a side of the aisle to select your new toy from. You go to the left side of the aisle, the story ends, you pick the Polly Pocket and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the right side of the aisle, you discover video games, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Hi, I'm Melody No Surname, and today we'll be looking at the once prominent idea of making video games that appeal to one specific gender and the death of that practice. But before I can even talk about any of that, we need a history lesson. Let's go back to the 70s and early 80s. Home video game consoles were exciting, fresh, fun, and expensive. Jesus Christ, $900 for a Fairchild Channel F? Though, for that much cash, you could play Video Kart 19 featuring checkers. That's a steal when you consider that in order to play checkers on the Fairchild now, you're looking at spending at least $1,500. Playing video games was seen as nothing more than a very pricey hobby or toy thing, even more so than it is now. These older consoles are a good showing of the growing pains that the video game industry was going through at the very beginning. These things were sold as they are now, near or in the electronics section in your local supermarket. Video games were not only marketed towards the whole family, but were not set for any gender or any age in any way. That was until the year 1983, when the market completely crashed courtesy of unregulated checks on these consoles letting anyone put anything on them. Just a bunch of low-budget rushed trash that had nothing to it. Can you look at gameplay of Lost Luggage on the Atari 2600 and tell me that there was passion in this? People stopped trusting these companies and stopped buying and playing video games. Why would you buy another game from a company with no quality control after feeling like you've been scammed one too many times? This caused the great video game crash of 1983, which got so bad that Atari had to dump 728,000 unsold copies of E.T., Pac-Man, and other bad games of the time that didn't sell in a landfill down in New Mexico. We're seeing this once again in modern day too. Funko oversaturated the vinyl collectible market, and in order to clear their warehouse of bug-eyed freaks that no one can recognize, they're sending $30 million worth of their pop figures to a landfill. Sorry to go off topic, but the point is that the video game market was blown up with unplayable junk and everything took a turn for the worst until Nintendo. Nintendo was pretty unheard of for the time here in America, only really having dipped their toes into Japanese consumers with cards and toys. You know that story. Around this time, they had been making games in arcades and, of course, the Game & Watch handhelds. They even made a light gun for the first commercial video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey, which you may recognize from somewhere. While the crash in '83 was happening, over in Japan, the Famicom was being released. 2 years later, in '85, the Famicom was brought worldwide under the new name, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES for short, to insane success. It had quality control.
Get the fuck out of here.
It had good games.
It hurts.
It had robot. God, I love this little guy. Something I've neglected to talk about, however, is the way that Nintendo decided to push the Nintendo Entertainment System. You see, in order to avoid the electronics section of the store, they chose to put it in the toy aisle. Seemingly with no given reason, Nintendo chose the boy side. From there, video games picked back up and the video game market was saved. This time as a medium for boys and men and dudes. Really cool guys who wanted to do boy man things like shoot duck with gun, play sport ball, do math with a monkey, boobs. The success of the NES was crazy. I know that these sales numbers compared to the others that are much higher on this list of the best-selling consoles feel like I'm over-exaggerating. Of course, I lack a first-hand account, but I promise that these numbers are really good. So good that other companies picked up what Nintendo was putting down and followed suit, down to the push of video games to the young male demographic. And boy, is it a lot to take in.
let that happen.
Why would I buy a 32-bit system for $300 when I can get a 64-bit Jaguar system for $149?
Atari Jaguar 64-bit, $149.
What time will my daughter be home?
The passive type probably plays Nintendo.
Somewhere between 10 and 2.
The aggressive type probably plays Sega.
You want her back?
And the other type definitely plays 3DO, the most advanced home gaming system in the universe.
And that's where our history lesson ends, and we can finally get to the topic at hand, being the era of gendered games. Now, what exactly do I mean when I say gendered video games? I'm not referring to the many games pre-Crash, or the games where the protagonist is specifically a boy or a girl. Anyone can play as Mario, and anyone can play as Zelda, regardless of gender. I'm referring to those games that were designed to appeal to the stereotypes that fit either boy or girl, blue or pink. When it comes to video games for either gender, it's pretty hard to find good examples of games for young girls on older consoles, but there are a few out there. It just takes a bit of digging is all. Let's first look at the girl games on the NES and then compare them to the boy games for the NES. For girls, there was Barbie and The Little Mermaid. For boys, there was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghosts and Goblins, Mega Man, Excitebike, Batman, Ninja Gaiden, Tecmo Bowl, Castlevania, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Contra, Metroid with Samus's tits, and also Dr. Mario. The medical field is not a safe space for women, so I should clarify that I'm not saying that all of these games are specifically aimed at boys. Games like that didn't come for a while. It was most of the way that these were advertised, showing things that a stereotypical boy would go rabbit over. Just look at the best-selling or most highly revered games on the NES. You'll find plenty of games that aren't some hardcore badass beating the ever-living shit out of some gangly monsters and bad guys. Tetris didn't need guns to be the 4th best-selling game on that console, but Duck Hunt sure did. Throughout the next few generations of video game consoles, we still see mostly the same as before. Could always talk about the many Barbie games, especially the ones on PC with banging soundtracks. Of course, there's a few movie tie-ins that have a more female demographic, like the Disney Princess games as well. I genuinely had a hard time finding older games to mention, since most games are either a neutral ground or are more boy-leaning, with commercials still proving that exact point. Let's move a bit later in time. Nintendo is doing pretty roughly with both the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube having sold poorly. Sure, both of those are fondly remembered now, and they were in no way flops financially. They weren't huge gains like the Nintendo Entertainment System or the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, but these are better numbers than most consoles have gotten. However, they were outsold by more than I had ever realized by their respective generations' competition, and this wasn't gonna cut it for Nintendo. PlayStation and Xbox had pretty much cemented their lands as men consoles, with stuff like Call of Duty, Halo, and other first-person shooters, as well as hardcore car racing games and GTA. So here we are in 2004, something's brewing at Nintendo. Remember those families that got angry about their luggage? Help me! And how they caused the crash of 1983 that was now 21 years ago? Yeah, they're older. And what's to say they wouldn't be willing to give something new a try? Maybe those 40 to 60-year-olds wouldn't mind something, let's say, better for them. But what if Nintendo were to sell video games and disguise them as health and wellness for the common man? Ho 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 ho, delightfully devilish, Satoru Iwata. And thus, the era of the DS and Wii began. Nintendo went back a bit on the old hardcore advertising and shot straight for the head with not one, but 2 casual consoles in the span of 2 years, and my god, did these things do well. No. I don't think I'm expressing how well the Wii and DS did. I mean really, really well.
Lead got one.
Now, it is the latest must-have games console. Some dedicated players camped out for more than 2 nights to ensure that they were able to buy the Wii from Nintendo.
This is a Nintendo Revolution prototype.
But most shops have now sold out, and some angry customers have told us that they've been told they won't get a console in time for Christmas.
Well, the wait is over. This is Nintendo DS.
Hundreds of kids have lined up in a cold, rainy day in Los Angeles. Cold and rainy in Los Angeles. WTH.
So with a bigger audience and a broader demographic being targeted, we can finally see more niches get touched on than with any other console. There were games made for all types of people. Want to go fishing but don't want to go outside? We had loads of games for you. Feel like you need to work out a little bit more? Well, you're covered. Want to take up odd professions? No problem. The Wii has a slew of them. Need to study up on a new language?
あなたはラッキーです。
Feel the need to be evil and bad and mean by hunting deer? Well, sadly, there's lots of games that let you do that, but those are a video for another day. The Wii and DS are when the idea of gendered games came to be real. The consoles were huge sellers with giant player bases that ranged from your 5-year-old sibling to your 80-year-old grandma. These were consoles made to appeal to anyone and everyone, and they did exactly that. This is when I was finally able to do some more proper research and look for games to talk about, because for once there was something other than Barbie or Disney princesses being aimed at young girls. I first want to start with the most obvious girl game there is. The action-packed racing genre of games is no stranger to the hardcore, dirty, and extreme elements of the streets. When it came to boy-oriented games, there was Need for Speed, NASCAR, Ford, and many other games with monster trucks. But it was finally time for a woman to take the wheel.
Driver's seat. Put a bitch in the driver's seat.
With probably one of the most overused jokes of a Wii game, Action Girls Racing. Nothing I could ever say could make for a better joke than knowing that someone actually bought this game, removed the seal, and played it.
I can't do this.
Ooh! 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 Hey Mel, how's it going?
Hey Preston. Did you want to play a game?
Sure. Oh my gosh, it has a motion control option. What is this game?
Oh dear. So overall,
Amber let me down.
What was your honest opinion?
10 out of 10 game.
It's really bad shovelware that's only real playability comes from the fact that it's amusingly difficult to control. It also falls victim to the beautiful craze of cool things for kids being emphasized with a Z at the end instead of an S. As I said, nothing I could ever do or say about this game would be news to anyone chronically online. Let's look at what other racing games there are for girls around this time. Let's see here. God damn it, there's Barbie again! Would you like to pick a profession? As I said before, the Wii has loads to pick from for you to try out before studying the real thing. Perhaps you're a boy and would like to shakily control a pizza moped, or you're a girl and would like to shakily cut someone's hair, accidentally cutting off their ear in the process. Or maybe you're still gender ambiguous and would rather scoop some ice cream for Cold Stone. Say, that sure is an interesting company that developed this one. I sure do doubt that I'll ever see that name come up while working on a video ever again. If none of those professions lined up with what you want to do in your future, how about we look at the franchise best known for giving you options on these consoles? Would you like to be a master chef, fashion designer, perhaps a veterinarian? No? God, you're hard to please. How about a figure skater, rock star, teacher, dancer, horse rider, interior designer, wedding designer, ballet star, movie star, gymnast, restaurant owner, cheerleader, doctor, makeup artist, florist, soccer player, detective, party planner, reporter, zookeeper, artist? Could always just be a stay-at-home mom. No? Not even a babysitter? Well, how about being the damn baby itself? Want to be a party baby when you grow up, you indecisive whore? Adding this into the script after I edited that bit there, but could you imagine finding out your parents signed you up as a baby to appear on the cover of a Wii game 15 years ago? I'd lose my mind. You'd be surprised to find out just how many games in the Imagine series there are. I myself was surprised that there were more than like 10 of them. There's plenty that I didn't even bother to name because they're just so similar to another one that was already named. These are some of the cheapest and most common games on the Wii and DS. Subscription service Retro Game Treasures even refuses to include them in their boxes, and they consider that a plus to their business, which I think says a lot about these landfill games. Let's say that maybe the idea of having your own child actually did catch your eye, but you're not too sure and want a test run. I don't blame you for feeling the desire to have a baby. After all, how could you say no to this? But I raise you one better than Imagine Babies with a dual release game. You know, when Pokemon does it, it's cool, right? One game that gives you a cool legendary, but the other gives you the other cool legendary. It can sometimes make picking which version to get difficult, and the folks over at Dancing Dots in South Peak realized that they could do the same with babies. Introducing Baby Blue version and Baby Pink version. Yes, Yes, in order to have a boy, you need to pay $2 extra. The wage gap extends its grip to which virtual baby you can have. I find it genuinely odd that anyone thought this was a good idea. A dual release where the only difference is the gender of the baby. Everything is the exact same across either one. Here, which one am I showing you gameplay of right now? Take a guess. Did you guess My Baby Boy? Well, you're wrong. It was neither. It was My Baby 3 and Friends. Remember Cooking Mama? A genuinely good game that was pretty fun to play. Well, that's for girls. Girl alert! Girl alert! That's right, you were reminiscing about a game for women who belong in the kitchen. Remember, mamas are usually women. Boys don't want to cook, they want to do something dangerous, such as playing a less fun game like Science Papa. These two are personal favorites when bringing up gendered games. Neither were made by the same company, Cooking Mama being published by Majesco and Science Papa being published by Activision. Since Science Papa is clearly a take on Cooking Mama, with its minigame compilations being science-based and not food-based, the creators of Cooking Mama had a call-out post to Science Papa that reveals some interesting lore. So you want some dirt on Science Papa to splash on your site? I'll shovel it. We dated briefly when he had much better hair. And now he clearly wants a piece of the best-selling pie by associating himself with an incredibly successful, and I'll emphasize, happily married woman. Frankly, he never appreciated my cooking, and I grew wary of his tedious experiments. You want real mind-bending science? Go figure out how to make a Tolos cassolette for your next dinner party of 20, and let me know how it goes, Papa. Maybe you're saying that Science Papa isn't a boy game, and I hear you. After all, Science Papa had no response to Mama, which isn't a very man thing of him to do. How about the much more inappropriate and definitely worse, Cooking Mama, Mama Kills Animals? I know it's not targeted at a young male demographic or anything, but its use of, yeah, would gross most people out, and I'm saying that's boy-ish. This game is rumored to have gotten PETA a lawsuit from Majesco, but I can't find anything on that. I can, however, find yet another Cooking Mama response. I would never put a rat in my ratatouille. Like any accomplished cook, I create my recipes to appeal to a broad range of tastes and preferences. My only goal is to ensure you leave the table well fed. She's an honest woman, and no amount of animal rights will take her down. Minigame compilations were abundant in this generation. Not to say they aren't now or anything, but neither then nor now were any of them near as charming as Cooking Mama. A minigame compilation is simply a bunch of smaller games all loaded into one bigger game, usually with pretty low quality or care since they're easy to make. A lot of them felt like they'd been made in the span of maybe a week or less with the sheer lack of substance. Though I'd say the shining star of quality in this genre would be the WarioWare games, of which there are 3 in this generation: Touched, DIY, and Smooth Moves. 4 if you include Snapped, the DSiWare game. Some of the best experiences on the DS and Wii that you could ever buy. I actually have quite the history with these games. I recall coming back to my hometown after a road trip and stopping at the local GameStop. There I saw WarioWare DIY for $9, and my mom bought it for me. I then proceeded to play it as we exited the GameStop, as we entered the local errands, and as we went home, and for about a year after that, learning to create games and make comics and using the Music Maker. But that game, while a bit more on the boy side, courtesy of the masculine prowess of Wario, is mostly a gender-neutral franchise. Now, we already talked about taking care of babies, but what about games for babies? There are a few gendered games that target toddlers rather than pre-teens or teenagers, a prime example being the Smart Boys or Smart Girls games. Including the gender-neutral versions, there are 13 total games in this lineup, and they all seem to be nothing more than minigame compilations that include drawing, coloring, and the like. It's pretty hard to find gameplay of these online, but I imagine that's just because no 5-year-old is going to go through the effort of emulating the game and uploading the footage to YouTube. Positively riveting gameplay, Jason F 2019. This is Mean Girls DS, a much lesser known talking point that was about 6 years late to the party of Mean Girls hype. It was canned before release and remained a piece of lost media, whose existence was unconfirmed until it was found by YouTuber Ray Mona, whose videos on the history and search I highly recommend watching. Now, I do have to say that any piece of recovered lost media is good, but sometimes it lands in an area of like, this is only cool because of its lost media status. I'm a DS collector, and if this game had come out physically, I'd want it for sure. But if it had never been canceled, I wouldn't care about it in the slightest. This was a late-era DS game that had neither charm nor character to it. Sure, you could say, oh, but Melody, it does have character. Look, those are the Mean Girl characters, the main characters from the hit 2004 movie Mean Girls. Melody, that's the character. But do these minigames scream Mean Girls to you? Remove the box art, and this game becomes indistinguishable from any other girl game of the era. This was just another low-effort cash grab using a popular IP with the help of cheap minigames. Like I said, these things were abundant. There's so many minigame compilations, especially the ones surrounding television properties. If you see a video game based on a show or movie on the Wii or DS, there's a very, very strong chance that it was just a minigame compilation or the dreaded bad platformer. Hey, this one had a pillowcase bundled with it. Interesting. And after discovering this oddity, I then spent the next 2 hours looking through listings of this game on various shopping websites in the hopes of finding a copy of iCarly on Wii with the pillowcase to no avail. Only when searching through sold listings did I find one that sold for $20. It is my passion to buy something stupid like this, but it appears that it's so rare that I'm unable to waste more money on this video than I already have with Action Girls Racing. I personally think that the definitive girl experience on any console ever is a tie between two games, and I think that the best way to settle this is to compare them and give them points to see who wins. First one we're going to look at is the daring game for girls. It immediately gets a point for being on both the Wii and the DS. That title too. So daring. The gameplay is pretty bad, the visuals are silly. This would absolutely create a lot of laughing with how bad it is. It's a minigame collection using so many of the boring and low effort minigames used in this genre. Oh hey, the Game Grumps played it a long time ago. This is one hell of a great contender. So who's on the other side of the ring? Good God! Yes, I own this game, and no, I will not tell you how much I paid for it. It is obnoxiously obscure. So obscure, in fact, that the only gameplay online is a trailer, as well as the credits and a short that has a bunch of random snippets. It's a late-era DS game coming out several months after the DS. Considering it's shovelware on an older console with a targeted demographic and a small print, this game has everything a bad game needs to be perfect. It also gets points for being incredibly difficult for me to record gameplay of too.
This sucks.
Now let's talk about the end of this era. In 2011, the 3DS launched as the successor of the DS. Despite initial sales being low, it picked back up. In 2012, the Wii U launched as the successor of the Wii. Despite initial sales being low, it did not pick back up and became one of the lowest selling consoles from Nintendo. Even the 3DS started to fizzle out as the years went on. Sure, both of them got their respective loads of gendered games, but it was nowhere near what the DS and Wii saw, and I can think of a few reasons why. With this generation, they were advertising to the average family hard.
Hot buttered popcorn, that's a deal!
Maybe a bit too hard. These ads are really hard to watch, and I think that both consumers and the video game publishers and developers picked up on that. While these sales numbers are nothing to sneeze at, cat just sneezed. They were low, and that means that there was far less incentive to create a bunch of trash games. Think about it. Would you prefer to make your girl game that sells poorly to 150 million people who don't know any better, or to 75 million people who know what you're doing? Realistically, boiling down the idea of a gendered game brings you a bunch of games targeted at girls. I'd be willing to say that the concept of a boy game has really died out by this point. It's hard finding games aimed at males, while it is incredibly easy to find games that were aimed at females. All the boy games are exactly what I said earlier. It's the normal fare for these consoles. I travel to my local game store from time to time and look at the new games for the Switch and the PS5 and whatever the hell the new Xbox is, only to see the lack of these girly games. I think in general, video games aren't made for either gender, but rather for everyone. But since they were marketed towards boys so heavily in the past, it's hard to pinpoint a game made specifically for boys. In some ways, I think it was pretty rude to make games and expect parents to buy their preteen daughters a copy, especially when your games are not good. You ruin what could be a good introduction to an incredibly beautiful art form that could inspire a young mind with something so bad that I'd rather play Lost Luggage.